Between the 90s and the 2000s, Africa changed completely from 2 decades and a half of economic stagnation and decline, negative growth rates, to a remarkable, unprecedented recovery. And I think that is the momentum, the change that took place between the 80s and the 90s and what we're seeing now. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that happened. Between the 90s and the 2000s, agricultural expenditure by African governments nearly doubled. It went up by 86% annual outlays for agriculture. And you remember the decades of declining expenditure. Agricultural gross domestic product went up by 63% against declining growth rates or stagnation. The momentum also is to be seen in the share of the population on the poverty line that declined between the 90s and the 2000s by almost 40%. And this is not dramatic unless we remember that that share was going up until the mid-90s. The level of malnutrition, depending on whatever indicator you use, has gone down between 20 and 40% over that decade, against rising trends prior to that. But the best picture to show what changed and how important it is and why we really should call it a momentum is the breadth of the progress. We always had one African country or 2 or 3 that did well. But never have we had, for such a long period of time, such a large number of countries growing at higher rates and sustaining it over a 10, 15-year period. That is the real momentum. We are also seeing transformation of the value chains. The traditional staples look different than they used to be. And here I just picked up the example that most of us wouldn't know about, which is the millet sector in Senegal. This is how it used to look. You grow beautiful millet, you harvest it, you take it to a local mill, and then you make the products you need to prepare these beautiful dishes, always in the household. Nowadays, what used to be done in the household is prepared industrially into ready-to-cook products with so many brand names all over the place. You can choose to go and get them and prepare your food, or you can even go and have ready-to-eat meals on the shelf, which is a totally different value chain compared to what it used to be just a decade ago. And this is what you see in cassava. This is what you see in the maize meal industry. This is what you see in a lot of other value chains. The momentum is also what African countries did to try and get the agriculture sector to grow faster. And here I would highlight CADEP, because we're going to be talking about mutual accountability. We're going to be talking about keeping the momentum through that effort. What we just did recently, and it's in the report, the status report by AGRA, is to look at how those countries that early on committed to implementing CADEP, how they fared compared to those who never embraced CADEP. And we'll look at 3 indicators: agricultural productivity and output growth rate, GDP per capita rate of growth, and the decline in malnutrition. And in all those 3 categories, they did twice as well as the others. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but the expenditure levels that you saw, the mutual accountability processes that we'll be talking about, the quality of policies, the commitment, the sustainability, all did play a role in that. And that is at the center as well of the momentum to keep, and that's why this session on mutual accountability is extremely important. So why seizing the momentum? You look at how growth reversed from fast rate in the 60s and 70s, and a slump, those 2 decades I talked about, and how it resurged after the 2000s. That is that growth spurt, which is the momentum we're talking about. But why is it important to seize that momentum? And here it is. We lost ground. In the 60s, if we didn't have the slump in the 70s and 80s, we would have had a per capita GDP by 2025 projected of almost $2,000 in agriculture. We're going to be at $1,200. Yes, we did well over the last 10, 15 years, but we have to make everything so that you can make up the ground that we lost. It's about $800 per capita that we're short of in 2025 because of what happened in the 70s and 80s. So no matter how good the progress is, there is this to keep in mind. It's also important to keep the momentum, knowing that bridging that gap will require twice the growth rate that we have had in the past, which is a huge challenge. Therefore, yes, we can celebrate, but we cannot be complacent. And mutual accountability, the way we do business, the review, and the efficiency of how we work is important. It's also important to seize the moment because, yes, despite the progress, we still have challenges in terms of how many African are hungry, 30% or higher in several regions. We also have to seize the moment because we're supposed to be spending 10% in agriculture. Despite the progress, we're way below that. If we did better, we'll do much more better than we did in the last few years. And some of those challenges, in terms of hungry people, in terms of bridging the gap of growth, those could be addressed efficiently. Now, how do we seize the moment? What we've seen through Caribbean is that those countries spent more, have been able to grow better, to reduce poverty, and then to have a higher level of nutrition indicators. That path has been proven over the last 10, 15 years. It may not be surprising anyway, but for us it is surprising because that's the first time we can look back and see that's being a reality on the continent. We could not in the 90s, we could not in the 80s, we could not in the 70s, but now we can look back. And that's important for us to know that. So what we did to achieve this is what we have to make sure we continue to do and to do better. So looking at that, talking about it, reviewing it, benchmarking it is important. That's why mutual accountability is important. All right. We also know that the better we do business, the better we manage the economies through more coherent, more consistent, and continuous policies with the same expenditure of money, we can have higher growth, higher poverty reduction, and better nutrition outcomes. So that is important, and that's why mutual accountability and seizing the moment are very key. How do we improve policies? I was talking yesterday about what the policy regimes were in the 80s and 70s. All the different things that we're not doing right and which we have corrected over the last few years. Seizing the momentum and the mutual accountability process. Policy coherence, consistency, and continuity, the way we do business is going to be important to help us sustain that momentum. And those kind of policies that are based on local and relevant evidence, mutual accountability will make sure that happens, that have clear milestones, that are measurables, that undergo rigorous review, technical, social, and environmental, that are adequately tracked and evaluated, and that are open to inclusive consultation and dialogue. We're in the middle of mutual accountability. That's what really this session about. If you do that, then with the same amount of money, you'll achieve better outcomes. And then if you get to the 10% of targets that we have under Maputo, then of course you know what we'll be facing. This is mutual accountability. There are several activities going on. This was one of my last slides. Yeah. I will not discuss this one because I know my colleague Godfrey Bahigwa in the next panel will discuss it. But 30 countries right now are trying to improve the way they do their business. opening the dialogue, talking to non-state actors, talking to development partners, reviewing what they do, benchmarking, tracking. And this is important, and that goes to the heart of mutual accountability. All of us, when we go to a doctor, we expect a lab report on which the doctor bases his or her course of action. Mutual accountability and the tracking and the measurement that goes with it has the same function for us. What it does, it benchmarks several things. It looks at how we're doing against hunger. It looks at how we're doing against growth. It establishes baselines that allows countries to follow through, and it evaluates how countries do business. I leave it to Godfrey to go and discuss that. But here's how I link it, the three of them. In order for us to seize the momentum, to achieve the Malabo goals, and to achieve the SDGs, we have to do three things. We have to have high-quality investment plans that are capable of achieving the Malabo targets and achieving the SDGs. We have to have expenditure plans that make sure that not only do you spend more towards 10%, but you spend better and wiser. And we have a policy plan that shapes the way we do business. Make sure that every dollar or shilling or kwacha that we spend give us a better outcome in terms of growth, poverty reduction, and nutrition improvement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.